On this Friday night, assault-type guns immediately banned. The feds take aim at 1,500 types of firearms.
You don't need an AR-15 to bring down a deer.
What it means for owners. The Bank of Canada's new governor.
He has the right qualifications.
The man Ottawa's putting its money on to steer our economy out of the COVID-19 crisis. From rescue to recovery. The worst fears of Canada's military community now confirmed. And what's waiting in the wings for airlines?
If there's social distancing on the plane, I think that leads to higher fares.
Where the industry is headed after these turbulent times.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with sweeping new restrictions on assault-style weapons in this country. The federal government has now made it illegal to buy, sell or use roughly 1,500 different types of guns. It comes after last week's massacre in Nova Scotia, one of the worst mass killings in Canadian history.
30 years from now, an entire generation of Canadians will remember exactly where they were on Sunday, April 18th, 2020. They will remember how their sense of safety was shaken, how their outlook on the world was forever changed. They will remember the day that they lost some of their innocence. This chapter in our history cannot be rewritten, but what happens next is up to us. We can stick to thoughts and prayers alone, or we can unite as a country and put an end to this. We can decide together that enough is enough.
On the list of banned weapons, guns used in past mass shootings, including the AR-15. For people who already own these now prohibited weapons, the government says there's a 2-year amnesty period, and it's working on a program to buy back the guns. Michael Couteur walks us through the details and the reaction.
You don't need an AR-15 to bring down a deer.
One simple statement providing a possible peek behind the Liberals' decision to ban what they call assault-style rifles in Canada. Trying not to target hunters and other lawful gun owners, the government says these types of guns have no legitimate civilian purpose.
These weapons were designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time.
1,500 makes and models are included in the ban, including the gun used in the 2014 Moncton shooting and the ones used by the man who killed 14 women at Montreal's École Polytechnique in 1989.
For me, it feels like half a victory, not a complete one.
Nathalie Provost survived that attack despite being hit by 4 bullets. She's been lobbying for stricter gun laws, but even she is disappointed by the announcement.
There was supposed to be a complete ban on assault-style weapon. Now we see that it's not totally complete.
So what are gun owners supposed to do if they have one that is now prohibited? Well, there will be a grandfathering process and a 2-year amnesty period while the government sorts out a buyback program.
Canadians who purchased these guns did so legally, and we did not want to create a situation by prohibiting them all moving forward of putting those people in criminal jeopardy.
A buyback program or not, gun advocates say the entire ban is just smoke and mirrors.
There's no technical basis for it. It's purely a political move. It will have no effect on crime in Canada. It will not make Canadians any safer.
Well, it is political. The Liberals campaigned on gun control, so the Prime Minister believes he has the mandate to make this move. But the latest numbers may not bear that out. A recent Ipsos poll for Global News shows 52% of urban Canadians believe all guns should be made illegal in this country. The results may have been different if rural areas were also surveyed. Now, handguns aren't covered in this ban, even though the latest stats show they accounted for 57% of firearm-related homicides in 2018. When asked about it, Trudeau said his government plans to move forward on that in the coming months. Robin.
Michael Couture in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. The federal government has appointed a new governor of the Bank of Canada. Tiff Macklem has a heavy burden navigating Canada through this economic uncertainty caused by the pandemic. David Aiken has more on Macklem's history and why he got the top job.
I'm looking forward to building on the fine standard that Governor Polos, his team, and our predecessors have provided.
Tiff Macklem was always one of the favorites to follow the retiring Stephen Polos. Macklem had been the #2 man at the bank to former Governor Mark Carney. Together, Carney and Macklem, along with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and then Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, helped steer Canada through the 2008 financial crisis.
Governor-designate Macklem brings a deep knowledge of the Canadian economy and financial markets. He was one of Canada's leading economic stewards during the 2008 financial crisis, expertise that will serve Canada well as we work to deal with the COVID-19 crisis.
For now, Macklem's approach to the current crisis will be to continue steering the bank on the same course set by Polos.
The important message to Canadians is that the Bank of Canada is here to play its part to providing essential liquidity to the financial system so that the financial system can play its role, keep credit flowing.
Macklem will turn 60 next year. He was born in Montreal. He's fluently bilingual. And after spending most of his career at the Department of Finance and the Bank of Canada, he spent the last few years as the Dean of the Business School at the University of Toronto.
I certainly think he has the right qualifications for this. He might not be that well known to your average Canadian, but certainly his name is well known on Bay Street.
I mean, this leadership transition comes as Canada is experiencing one of the steepest declines in economic activity on record. Millions of Canadians, tens of thousands of businesses are relying on new federal measures for short-term liquidity, for eventual recovery.
Macklem's first day as Canada's 10th central banker will be June 3rd. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
Search efforts have shifted to a recovery mission in the Mediterranean Sea where a Canadian Navy helicopter crashed. 5 people on board that flight are presumed dead. A 6th person, Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra, is confirmed dead. Their Cyclone helicopter was returning to HMCS Fredericton after a training exercise when it went down in the Ionian Sea Wednesday. As Ross Lord reports, the Canadian Armed Forces say it's found more remains, but they have not been identified.
Yet another day of grief in Nova Scotia and another growing shrine. There's even more pain to come now that the military confirms none of the 6 occupants survived a Canadian Navy helicopter crash off the coast of Greece.
We are certain that if there were survivors, we would have found them within the past 48 hours.
Navy officials say they've found additional remains which will not be identified until they're brought back to Canada next week. They've also discovered more wreckage from the cyclone that crashed into the ocean about 3 kilometers from HMCS Fredericton.
We have found additional debris associated with the helicopter, including a side door and pieces of the fuselage.
As tributes continue, military instructors who knew several of the fallen honor them with words.
Keen young professional officers, they accepted the risk of the life they had chosen. They knew they were taking risks at sea, in the air, and on the ground. They knew that, and they accepted it, and they got on with the job.
An Air Force flight safety team is leaving Canada to investigate the accident. The military says members will begin their work as soon as they arrive in Italy and travel to the crash scene. The Cyclone fleet will also come under scrutiny. In 2017, a software problem in the flight control system forced the Cyclone to suddenly drop in altitude during training, grounding the helicopters for 9 weeks.
I know they had to make a quick landing at one point, but it turned out to be minor.
This retired Navy commander who studied the cyclones says the choppers are popular with pilots.
The reports I've been hearing, many of them, from people who fly the Cyclone, are the pilots love flying that aircraft. It's powerful, it's responsive.
The Air Force says it's confident previous problems have been resolved. The Navy says HMCS Fredericton will leave the crash scene and sail to Italy. The 200-plus crew members will pause first to hold a vigil, paying tribute to their fallen colleagues. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Nova Scotia is also still grieving the loss of 22 lives in a murder rampage nearly 2 weeks ago. Among those killed, 49-year-old Lisa McCulley, a teacher and musician. Global News spoke with her sister, Jenny Kierstead, who was remembering her as a natural leader, someone who loved nature and life. McCulley was also a devoted mother. Her 2 children were home with her on that Saturday night, hiding in the basement on the phone with 911.
That dispatcher was the kids' lifeline for 2 long hours, and they helped them through, and they are safe, and that is a blessing.
Kierstead is now hoping to meet with the dispatcher on the other end of that call that night. Shifting to some more positive news here at home. After weeks of tight COVID-19 restrictions, today people on Prince Edward Island found themselves with a bit more freedom. Starting today, islanders can now access more non-urgent healthcare services, such as physiotherapy. Groups of up to 5 people from different households are also allowed to gather outside as long as they practice physical distancing. Ontario has yet to ease its restrictions, but some relief is on the way. Premier Doug Ford says a select number of businesses will be allowed to reopen on Monday.
Folks, our hard work and perseverance, our patience is paying off. Today is a glimmer of hope, and it couldn't come soon enough.
Some of the businesses allowed to open Monday include garden centers with curbside pickup, as well as some car washes and auto dealerships. But the businesses must abide by public health rules, including physical distancing. Quebec says it plans to ramp up testing as it begins to ease restrictions. The province's chief medical health officer says the goal is to conduct up to 14,000 tests per day, up from roughly 6,000. Quebec has been hardest hit by the virus. As of today, it's recorded more than 27,000 cases, and more than 2,000 people have died. Today alone, Quebec reported more than 1,100 new cases. Across the country, more than 1,800 new cases have been recorded. The number of COVID-19 cases is still rising in many countries, but so is the number of recoveries. And today, the world reached a positive milestone. According to Johns Hopkins University, more than 1 million people have now recovered from COVID-19. In Canada, just over 55,000 people have tested positive. Of those, roughly 22,000 have recovered. Some more positive news. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the use of the drug Remdesivir for emergency COVID-19 treatment. Researchers say preliminary tests show the drug may help patients recover faster from the disease. New pressure on an American presidential candidate. Coming up, Joe Biden responds to allegations of sexual assault, plus the road to rebuilding Fort McMurray after another disaster. A glimmer of hope tonight for residents in Fort McMurray, Alberta. A mandatory evacuation order has been lifted in some areas, and some residents are getting a first-hand look at their homes to assess any flood damage. Dallas Flexhaug reports.
It's a nightmare Leon Hupy has lived twice.
I just got settled back in, and now we're running again.
Hupy lost his house in the 2016 wildfire. It was only rebuilt last year for it to be destroyed again this week by flooding. Like so many others in Fort McMurray, he's endured a lot, and he's trying to figure out how to rebuild everything all over again.
Just after we all went through this fire, and now to be hit again like this, it's like a double blow.
About 13,000 people have been forced from their homes because of rising water. Mandatory evacuation orders were lifted for some downtown areas Friday.
But to be clear, conditions are improving and we're beginning to turn the corner from response to recovery.
Some residents and business owners are permitted to access their properties, but everyone is being warned about potential property damage, and they may not be able to live in their homes yet.
We do have evacuees returning now, and I expect throughout the weekend that will continue. As for the full length of when we can expect everybody to be back home, I don't think that's been determined.
This week marks 4 years since a wildfire ripped through Fort McMurray. This property restoration specialist says helping rebuild after that natural disaster and then again now is a lot in a short span of time.
Mentally, it's exhausting. I find that trying to comprehend what's going on right now is very difficult. Not knowing what's actually going to be going on. We're hopefully get in today and be able to assess buildings, see what's kind of going on, and see the actual damage that happened.
Damage assessment teams have been deployed in the community as a recovery plan gets underway. Essential businesses, including key government infrastructure, grocery stores, gas stations, and pharmacies, will be given priority. The return of residents in the downtown core is happening a lot faster than first anticipated after water levels receded significantly. Some areas that were submerged under meters of water now only have puddles in the street. Robin?
Dallas Flexhaug in Fort McMurray, Alberta. Still ahead, the turbulent times facing airlines pushed to the brink by this pandemic. For those itching to get away, Air Canada predicts flights will resume by Christmas time. Speaking with the Canadian Club of Toronto, the company's vice president, Tim Strauss, says he expects to see a significant amount of flying domestically and to most places around the world. But he warns air travelers to brace for fewer flight options. The airline industry has been hit hard by the economic impact of COVID-19. Many airlines are facing huge losses over a major drop in demand. Redmond Shannon takes a look at what air travel could look like in a post-pandemic world.
Going nowhere. Almost 2/3 of all commercial aircraft are currently parked. Some airlines have had to literally chop wood to make enough wheel chocks. The COVID-19 pandemic is already pushing airlines in South Africa and Australia to the brink. Even profitable Air Canada and WestJet can only tolerate so much. In aviation, cash reserves disappear quickly. United Airlines lost $2 billion in the first quarter. It's raising funds by selling some planes and then leasing them back.
So the $2 billion loss here could easily become a 10, 12, $15 billion loss, and that's just with one airline.
Worldwide passenger demand is forecast to halve this year, with no end in sight for the government bailouts.
Part of that problem is we don't know what the other side looks like. Is that 2 months, 3 months, 5 months? Even governments don't have an infinite ability to print money.
Many airlines can't even take advantage of the low oil prices. They're usually locked in to rates agreed to last year. Obligated to pay for fuel they can't even burn. The crisis could truly reshape the industry, one that by its nature helped spread the virus. It must now make sure it minimises the risk of any resurgence. Dubai-based Emirates is introducing thermal scanning and antibody tests for passengers, with physical distancing on board too.
If you start to limit how many people they can put on a plane, that unravels the whole fabric of how they have built a financial model. But if there's social distancing on the plane, I think that leads to higher fares.
These new rules could make discretionary air travel less than enticing, at least until a vaccine arrives.
Well, I want to wear a face mask to fly from Washington to San Francisco, let alone to fly from New York to Zurich.
Any sort of recovery will be a tough sell for airlines. Renationalising some famous flag carriers, as is happening in Italy, may not be out of the question. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
To the U.S. now, where presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden is denying allegations he sexually assaulted a former employee in the early 90s.
I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened.
It's the first time Biden has addressed the accusation by former Senate staffer Tara Reid. Reid alleges he assaulted her in a Capitol Hill hallway. Biden is calling on the National Archives to release any records of complaints, but insists there are none. Reid did not report the alleged incident to police until last month. Up next, a day dedicated to doctors and the battles they face daily. In honor of May Day, ships around the world sounded their horns to honor the heroes of the high seas. Vessels blasted their horns for at least 3 minutes. The event draws attention to the people working around the clock to keep global supply chains flowing during the pandemic and every day. Health professionals are also working around the clock during the pandemic. They're on the front lines and the last line of defense in this fight against the virus. Tonight, in honor of National Physicians Day, we're shining a spotlight on the incredible work and sacrifices they make every day. Here's Mike Drolet.
Yes,
In Ray Gentle's darkest moment battling COVID-19, he was in need of medical care and something more.
I was hyperventilating. I was sweating like a pig. I was just losing it. But then the paramedics came and they calmed me down a lot.
It's that ability to relate to people in crisis that sets frontline healthcare workers apart. And if Canadians didn't know that before, All they need to do is open their windows at 7 p.m. and listen. This is Vancouver paying tribute to doctors and nurses and orderlies and anyone else fighting for the Ray Gentles of the world. It's a scene that's playing out every day in cities across the country, and after the cheering subsides, the lights turn on. Giant hearts to express gratitude.
So these things are really helpful, and they're really uplifting, because there are times where we're kind of just sitting there in the hospital thinking, when is this going to end? And just knowing we have all that support from our community and around the world is just really heartwarming, and it keeps us going.
No one could fault physicians for fearing all this. They trained for years to learn how to heal. Few expected this big a battle against an invisible virus. Yet there they are, returning to the front lines every day, putting themselves and their families at risk. So when Kirk Thompson of London's Can-Am RV Centre got a call from a nurse needing to physically distance herself from her own family, he didn't hesitate.
She said, "Would you have an RV that we could rent from you?" And I said, "I'm not charging you anything for this. You're doing so much for us and the community, and you're doing, you're making all the sacrifices. This is a minor thing for me to do."
It's not minor at all, and he's since lent out another 20 units to doctors and nurses and other frontline staff who are working countless hours and sacrificing more than we've ever asked of them, never losing that inherent trait of compassion that sets them apart.
Every patient that walks in is a patient, is a human being on that other side, and we can't forget that in this crisis.
On National Physicians Day, what better way to pay tribute than to let them work? Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight we leave you with some of the artistic tributes to Canadian healthcare workers. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Good night.